What happened in Episode 1 of Westworld Season 2? How many different timelines were we looking at? What's going on with the Man in Black, Bernard, Dolores and Maeve? And how did that lake get there? This is my explanation of Episode 1. Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Deep Geek. This video is brought to you with the support of my brilliant Patreon community. Please do check out the link to my Patreon page if you're interested in supporting Deep Geek or joining up for some exclusive audio content. And do consider subscribing here if you enjoy the video. Oh, and there will obviously be spoilers here if you've not watched the episode yet. Right from the start, it is clear, not only has Westworld returned with as much style and brilliance as it had in Season 1, but it is also going to continue to lean heavily on multiple timelines to tell the story. There are at least 3 and probably 4 in this episode alone, with at least one more to come in the next episode, picking up with William and Logan after the events of Season 1. So let's break down what these timelines are. The first, which is where the episode starts, is from 35 years ago. We see Arnold and Dolores having another one-to-one session. There isn't a huge amount of plot development here, that will come in future episodes, but there is a lot of foreshadowing. Arnold saying he is frightened of what Dolores might become and the path she might take, and there is a rather enigmatic statement about an ocean that I think may turn out to be central to our understanding of the season, but we will come back to that later in this video. Then we come forward 35 years to the main timeline, which is picking up in the immediate aftermath of the massacre at the end of Season 1. Maeve is on her way back into the complex, having attained consciousness at the end of last season. She clearly has all her powers that she picked up in Season 1, heightened intelligence, knowledge of how to use the Delos repair facilities, and ability to command and control the other hosts, for example. This last part is crucial, because the hosts themselves now appear impervious to human voice commands. The person with the most control now is Maeve. Anyway, it appears that despite the revelation that her daughter is probably now playing the role of a daughter to a different rancher, Maeve still wants to find her, and she enlists Lee Sizemore and Hector to help her. It was quite a symbolic moment when she makes Lee strip for her, like she and so many other hosts had to strip for him and other humans over the years. She is turning the tables and making sure he knows it. But she's showing signs of compassion and love, not just the need for revenge that is overwhelming Dolores. It will be interesting to see where this goes, because although she seems ruthless in disposing of people in her way, her primary motivation seems to be love, not hate. It's noteworthy here that there is no sign or even mention of armistice. She is loose, homicidal, and, if she hasn't had any further reprogramming, probably still hunting for Wyatt, who is of course Dolores. I'm sure we'll find her popping up somewhere unexpected later in the season. Also, in the immediate aftermath of the massacre, the Man in Black gets back into his old gear and heads out into the park. He finally has the meaningful, danger-filled experience he always craved from Westworld. And then the child Ford host appears. Of course, this was entirely planned by Ford while he was alive, and it seems that he has a game for the Man in Black called Find the Door. This is a fascinating interaction between the two of them. The clear implication here is that Ford saw how engaged William became in trying to find and solve the maze, and has created something similar for him now. I'll set out exactly what I think Ford is doing here in another video later this week, but it's clear that he has plans for the Man in Black from beyond the grave. We will see a lot more of this storyline in the weeks to come. It's quite a slow start, but it's going to be crucial to the overall plot this season, and I think it will be something of a redemption arc. This episode is called Journey into Night, which is what Ford said was the name of his next narrative. I suggest that he created this narrative for the Man in Black, as well as the wider hosts. Then we have Charlotte and Bernard, again in the immediate aftermath of the massacre. Bernard is also in the third timeline 2 weeks later, but for now let's concentrate on what happened to him and Charlotte after the massacre. We pick up with them sheltering in a barn along with some other survivors. Some hosts kill one of the guests and they make their escape. Charlotte and Bernard make it to a bunker, but the others are ambushed by Angela and the Wyatt cultists. Now, as an aside, but I think it's an important one, this segment, and the one when a couple of hosts attack the man in black, tells us a lot about what's actually going on with the hosts, because the situation is different for all of them. There isn't, at this stage anyway, a full-scale rebellion going on. A very small number, Dolores, Maeve, Bernard, possibly Angela and probably soon Teddy, have gained self-awareness. A few more, the Wyatt cultists, were programmed by Ford to support Dolores. The Ghost Nation are still a mystery but clearly remain Ford's tools. Some, like the hosts who shot the guest outside the barn and those attacking the man in black, seem to be freed from their previous loops and put onto new narratives, but don't seem to have full self-awareness. And some, like the farmer killed by Charlotte and the other guests, are still trapped in their original harmless programming. We'll come back to this lots of times this season, but this isn't a straightforward hosts versus humans struggle. It's complex. Anyway, Charlotte shows Bernard a secret off-grid bunker or lab that was clearly being run direct by Delos. We get our first hints of what Delos have been up to all this time. There are the drone hosts, who seem to be doing the work of technicians, and evidence that they have been collecting guests' DNA and experiences. The hosts have apparently been recording everything that's been going on. The drama here, though, is with Bernard. He got hit in the scuffle earlier and needs repairing. He seems to be leaking brain fluid, so surreptitiously he injects himself with some more. This doesn't look like a long-term fix. It may keep him going for a bit longer, but it won't fix the fundamental problem. This is probably why we see him early on in the episode having what looks like a mental breakdown of some kind. This will probably happen at some point between this timeline and the next one, when we see him without shaking hands. So he will get fixed up, but not yet. But down here in the lab, Bernard has his eyes opened to Delos's wider plans and, put simply, their callousness and single-mindedness in pursuing their goals, because Delos aren't willing to launch a rescue mission for them, or the other guests, or even their own board, until the data in Peter Abernathy's head is safely smuggled out of the park. Delos do not look like good people. Now, this may be a complete red herring, but we see here Charlotte taking direct orders from someone. The question is, who? She is executive director of Delos, and the board seem to be in Westworld for the gala, so presumably the person giving orders is James Delos himself. Although, if so, he does appear rather robotic in his replies. Hold that thought, because we may come back to it in future episodes. But in terms of plot, the main thing here is that Bernard manages to survive and continue to appear human. Presumably he will keep up the subterfuge for a while as he figures out what he wants to do. And Bernard also finds Peter Abernathy. So the manhunt for him will begin in earnest next episode. From Delos's perspective, he is the single most important host in all of the park right now. Then we cut to Dolores, a few days later, or perhaps up to 2 weeks later. We have plenty of shots of her and Teddy terrorising the guests and board members, acting as the avenging angel. First there's just the two of them, then at some point she meets and teams up with Angela and the Wyatt cultists, as Ford doubtless planned. We don't see that in this episode, but perhaps we will later. What we do see are lots of hints about where Dolores is at and what she wants to do next. She is very clear that she has two uploaded personalities in her at the moment, the rancher's daughter and Wyatt, and she is also developing her own personality. Further, she says that she remembers everything. This means that she remembers what happened with Arnold 35 years ago, and, as we saw in the trailer, the existence of the outside world. This has clearly led her to set her sights high. She realises that the humans won't stop coming after them. Retreat, as Teddy suggested, or even claiming Westworld will not be enough. They need to take the outside world too. This, I think, links to Ford's original plan for Maeve to infiltrate the outside world, and also, I think, tells us what it is when Angela rides up to tell Dolores that we've found it. Surely this is an entrance to the Mesa Hub, a way into the facilities so that they can repair themselves, and ultimately a way out of the park. The other set of events happening in the last timeline, 2 weeks after the massacre, involves Bernard, Stubbs, who appears to have been released or escaped from the Ghost Nation, and the Delos security team, which is now arriving to destroy the hosts on the surface and rescue any remaining guests. This immediately tells us that one thing that has happened in the 2 weeks since we saw Bernard with Charlotte is that Peter Abernathy has been located, because Delos were refusing to send in their team until he was. And it also tells us that Delos have largely left the park and Dolores alone for 2 weeks. A lot can happen in 2 weeks, as we'll see later. Bernard wakes up on the beach, clearly confused and having done something. We will come back to what this is in a moment, because it is important, and because a lot of what happens in the next few episodes will be about filling in the details in this 2-week gap between these two timelines. What happened after the massacre, but before the Delos security team arrived. But in this timeline, Bernard and Stubbs get carried along with the Delos security team as they do a sweep of the park. We see a fascinating interaction between Carl Strand, the head of ops for Delos, and what looks like a representative from a nation-state that tells us that Westworld is on Earth, on an island, and not in a bubble under the ocean or on the moon or whatever other fantastical ideas that have been swimming around. And it tells us quite how powerful Delos are as an organisation, that they can tell sovereign nations to mind their own business. Delos may not rule the world, but they are very, very powerful. Powerful enough to ignore what countries tell them to do, even when news of the murder of dozens of hugely important people spreads to the outside world, as it clearly has. Anyway, the security team and Bernard go to the scene of the massacre and see Ford's body. I think this is confirmation, if we still need it, that Ford did die at the end of Season 1. It would be very easy to check the body to be doubly sure that he wasn't a host. They also see a Bengal tiger that has apparently leaked over from one of the other parks. Perhaps this came through with Maeve from Shogun World. We know that she goes there this season, so perhaps she opens a way between the two parks. Then, most importantly, seeing that the hosts are curiously all gathered in one place, they head off to Distant Valley to investigate. Now, this is when it gets really interesting, because we heard mention of the valley earlier in the episode through the memories of a dead member of the Ghost Nation. We see him being shot by Dolores, and her saying, "I told you, friend, not all of us deserve to make it to the valley beyond." So the hosts were gathering in the valley because Dolores wanted them there, or most of them anyway. And now we see that the valley is not a valley anymore. It has been recently flooded, and the hosts are all dead, presumably drowned. And then Bernard says that he killed them all. So, what's going on? My best guess is that Bernard and Dolores meet at some point in this 2-week period. We know that they do meet at some point from the trailer, and we know that Dolores has an attachment to Arnold, on whom Bernard is based, and that Bernard is discovering new and unsettling things about Delos and is therefore likely to be sympathetic to the host's cause. He is one himself, after all. So perhaps they team up and come up with an audacious plan. They gather the hosts together. Remember, the hosts are not all part of the rebellion. Many of them are still in their loops. And then they kill them all. At least, they kill their bodies. And then wake their consciousnesses in new bodies in the Mesa Hub. Bear with me because this may sound like a crazy thing for them to do. It is actually completely rational. There was a throwaway line from Angela last season where she said that Teddy wasn't ready yet, but perhaps he would be in the next life. She kills him to help him. And we saw Maeve kill herself many times in order to wake up in the Mesa Hub. And we know that one of the things that can help trigger self-awareness is suffering, and another is cognitive dissonance. Is killing the hosts like this a plan to try to get all of them self-aware in one fell swoop, or at least get all of their consciousnesses down below ground? If Dolores is serious about taking the mainland, she certainly can't do it with just a handful of self-aware hosts. She needs all of them. This explains why Dolores might have been so keen to find access to the Delos facilities. It's the next step in her rebellion. And why she killed the Ghost Nation host, saying he wasn't worthy of getting to the valley. She was being picky about who she wanted there. And let's not forget, Delos security didn't arrive for 2 weeks. This was enough time to come up with a plan this audacious. Delos' understanding of what has been going on in Westworld during this period is so poor that they weren't even aware of where all the hosts were until they switched on their tracking devices. They say that communications have been down for 2 weeks. So anything could have been happening. And we've seen these shots from the trailer which clearly looks like Dolores and co. trying to storm the Mesa Hub, and Bernard being there. And all this makes the discussion between Arnold and Dolores at the very start of the episode even more loaded with foreshadowing. He says that he dreamed that Dolores and the others were on a distant shore on the other side of an ocean, and he wasn't with them. Perhaps this isn't just him metaphorically talking about there being a gulf between humans and hosts, but a hint of where the hosts are going. Dolores is taking the hosts to the mainland, but Bernard is staying behind. We were told that this season of Westworld would be looking outwards, not inwards, that it would be much bigger in scale and ambition, and this fits with the idea that the hosts and Dolores have big plans, not just for Westworld, but for the whole planet. But what do you think? Do you agree with my thoughts on where this is all heading? What did you see that I missed? Let me know in the comments below. As I said, please do check out my Patreon page if you're interested in supporting me make more videos like this, or if you want to access more exclusive audio content. Thanks for watching. That's all for this time, and I'll see you again soon.